Welcome to the Cloak and Dagger podcast. On this podcast, we'll be talking about freeform show Cloak and Dagger. Here are your hosts, Kat and Butch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Cloak and Dagger podcast. My name is Kat, and I am here as always with my co-host Butch.
Officer Fuchs.
So we are here to recap, review this week's episode 8 entitled Ghost Stories. This episode really got me. There was a lot of feels in this episode this week, huh?
You mean more than usual, right? Because every week,
right.
they destroy us, and they got a little bit extra feisty with our feelings this week.
I would definitely say so, but we did have some really amazing moments that we will get into in the episode. But before we jump into our recap, let's pause for a word from one of our sister podcasts.
Hey there, Cloak and Dagger fans. We are Abel, Andrew, and Adam from the Shadowhunters podcast.
If you're a fan of Shadowhunters, come and discuss the show with us every week. And during the hiatus, listen to our original content, including episode rankings, rip it or ship it, and character best and worst moments.
And if you haven't heard of Malik, you are truly not living your best life.
Check us out everywhere where podcasts are located. And thank you guys for listening. Enjoy your show.
Okay, we're back. Let's jump right into this episode. So we start out with a wonderful scene with little Tandy and her dad, and that's played along with a scene of little Ty and Billy, and then their mom and dad as well. So we got like a really good family look, and they were setting up for what we know to come in later scenes, with Billy kind of encouraging Ty, you're going to get older. That was a really cute scene to me, because if you had younger or older siblings, that was a question that maybe you got asked if you were an older sibling. When am I going to grow up? When am I going to be bigger like you? So that was a really cute scene. But, Billy basically telling him, you're going to be like me, but you're going to be better. So that was pretty heartwarming. I love those Billy scenes, and the actor who plays little Ty is amazing.
Yeah, man, he's kind of, whenever I see him, like his facials are like so good, and we saw a lot more of that in this scene, and interspersing that with young Tandy and both of those actors. I was really, really happy, because I wasn't expecting, I was never sure if we're gonna see more of the characters, those two actors. So the showrunner Joe Pokaski, he tweeted out any excuse to, he was so happy that they found more space for those two, and so are we, I guess.
Yeah, I was happy to see and they went into this more later in the episode, but what happened to them after they washed up on the beach. So we did to see that, so that was cool. And then the scenes with Tandy and her dad was basically her dad saying, you need to hold yourself up. You're not going to be a quitter. So again, those scenes kind of setting us up for scenes coming in the future. Then we're taken to a scene with what our new favorite character of the episode, Officer Fuchs, making pancakes for Detective O'Reilly. So it looks like they're pretty serious here. They're at his place, and he's making her breakfast. So they're talking about Connors, and then he calls her his girlfriend, and she's kind of like, well, and I thought it was funny because she never really said, yeah, I'm your girlfriend. She was just like, I'm gonna go after Connors.
Right. And
he said to her, we are.
I'm just really excited that they're putting time into this relationship. So I'm looking forward to, what we're going to see in the future. Maybe next season we'll see more of it. I'm just really happy for that.
So we have, that relationship. They're making pancakes, and then we're taken to a scene with Tandy. And this scene kind of gave me chills when Tandy was at the hospital. So she's obviously going to visit Ivan Hess. And she's got flowers, and she's walking down the hallway, and she passes Peter Scarborough. And there's that moment of recognition. in his eyes when he's like, "You're the girl who I changed the tire for," and she's kind of looking at him like, "Yeah, I know who you are." And didn't you get that like moment of recognition, like, "Oh, I need to watch out for you" kind of vibe from Peter Scarborough?
I actually was a little bit confused by it, like because he gives like this weird smile. So, and then we find out later that he I don't know, like he kind of figured out who she was.
Hmm.
So I was like worried, like, is he gonna cause a scene? Is he gonna like attack her? Like, like I guess he had that moment of realization, yeah, and so we weren't sure what was gonna happen. Okay, so he definitely recognized her, right?
Yeah.
And what was that weird smile? I don't get that weird smile. Like, is he planning something or what is that?
It's because he's so evil. Like that made me feel like, did he know who Tandy was when she showed up at his house? Like that's what
Right.
that made me think about that. And then you okay, you go back and think about that and you say, okay, they blame Nathan Bone for everything, right?
Yeah.
So he would know the players in the game, being as smart as he is in the position he is. So he would know Melissa, and he would have to be keeping tabs on Tandy, right? So he would know what she looked like. So when she showed up at his house, even though she was in her con disguise, he had to have known who she was at that point. And he was like, well, whatever, I'm gonna play along with this and I'm gonna go change the
Yeah.
tire and let's see where this goes. So I think
Right.
that meeting in the hallway that they just had with in outside the Ivan Hess's room was kind of like a signal to Tandy, because Tandy's smart too. So I think in that moment they had that realization that they both know who each other is and that they're both
Right.
watching each other.
They both know that the other person knows.
Yes.
So levels, and that comes out later.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily a good thing for Tandy. You don't want Roxanne in general, and especially a man like Peter Scarborough, to know who you are and to be keeping tabs on you in that
Absolutely.
sort of situation. So I think Tandy played it real cool, but that was definitely a moment there that they had with each other when they were crossing paths. But she does make it into Ivan Hess's hospital room. And you get this moment where she's looking for him in the bed and he's not there, and she gets, you kind of collectively get scared with her because you're like, what did Peter Scarborough do with him?
Right.
But he's really
Yeah.
just sitting in the chair, so it's okay. So he's happy to see her, and then we find out that he really has no real memory of what happened after the explosion. So he knows that they were looking for that energy source. You know that it wasn't oil, and they knew that. Um, he also then says that Nathan had a theory that it's ancient energy. So I thought that was pretty
Yes.
interesting that that's what they were introducing.
Yeah. And I was just talking to someone on Twitter about that. He had an idea that if you watch the Runaways TV show, they're kind of digging for something there too. Um, so it's probably not related, but I don't know, because him saying that it's ancient, like that's an interesting way to describe something, right? Like,
Right.
I mean,
It's not like
obviously,
different.
oil, yeah, yeah, like, and obviously, oil is ancient, of course, but when you say something's ancient, like, there's something there, and if you follow along with the Runaways, especially with the comic books, there's definitely something ancient underground over there. Just an interesting potential tidbit down the road.
Okay. Yeah, it was a really interesting choice of word to describe a source of energy as being ancient, because that's really putting a mysticism onto it. So that was
Yeah.
that was a cool little
Yes.
tidbit. And then Tandy's really kind of trying to push him for information. She's saying, they're blaming this all on my dad. You have to remember something. You're the only survivor from the accident. And then he kind of says, well, there's something I really didn't tell Peter Scarborough, and that's the fact that Nathan did write a memo, a couple weeks before the explosion, with his concerns that,
Right.
it was getting too hot, Roxanne is cutting corners, this is going to be a disaster. And, Tandy's like, where is this memo? And Ivan Hess says, don't worry, your dad was really smart. He had this safety deposit box and he kept all this work stuff in it. And he knew where it was, so he told her the bank where it was. And he told her that the password or the code for the box was Bernoulli. And he said, it's a joke between us. So I Googled Bernoulli, and Bernoulli was actually an 18th century mathematician. And he came up with Bernoulli's principle, which has to do with conservation of energy and fluid mechanics.
Okay.
So that was kind of like, that the little science joke between the two of them. So we find out that this memo exists. And so then, of course, that Tandy's going to go find the memo. I was really happy to see Ivan Hess again. I didn't know if he would come back in this episode or not, but I really like the actor who plays him, and I was happy to see him even if it was just for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, okay. So with what happened later in the episode, basically any character, not Cloak or Dagger, I'm just worried now whenever they show up on screen, especially if it's someone that that we like, and I guess we both like Ivan. But yeah, it's cool to see him. He looked really small in that chair, by the way. I don't know if they were doing that on purpose, but that was a giant chair that he was sitting on.
He did. So after we find out about the safety deposit box, which obviously is super important, Tandy goes to see her mom. And I probably forgot to mention, but in the beginning of the episode, this is where we're finding out that this is 8 years to the day of the day. So of the day that Nathan and Billy died. So we're 8 years ahead on the anniversary of their deaths. So
Right.
Tandy's going to go see her mom. And, she brings her coffee, and Tandy's saying, hey, you look nice today. And she makes a little comment like, aren't you going to spice up your coffee? And Melissa's like, no, I'm not going to do that today. So then they kind of start talking about, let's get a balloon and release that as a memorial to Dad. And they have a little funny exchange about how Melissa got a bar mitzvah balloon one year, and Tandy's like, don't worry, I'll get the balloon this year. But she does ask about the safety deposit box, and Melissa does confirm, yeah, your dad did have a safety deposit box. I've looked for it. I have no idea where it is. And, of course, Tandy comes back and says, well, hey, I kind of know where this box is now. The scene is just like, now knowing what I know now, the scene is breaking my heart to even just like review it again.
Yeah, on second watch, like a lot of the, you have to like watch all the Melissa Bowen scenes again with a different kind of filter.
Yeah. Exactly.
Knowing what we know now.
Yeah. Yeah. All of the episodes, like every one of her scenes, because it's just
right.
So freaking. And we're interspersing this scene with Ty, and he's eating breakfast with his parents, and it's a really different scene. They're having kind of a somber, quiet breakfast. Nobody's mentioned Billy. Ty looks kind of upset that nobody's mentioned Billy, and it looks like they're just kind of trying to get through their day.
Right.
We go back to Tandy and Melissa, and they're looking through a box, and they're looking for the key for the safety deposit box. So they find that, and then they find some other things, a picture of Nathan, a watch. And Melissa tries to tell her, a story of one of their dates, and Melissa doesn't get the facts quite right. She says they were at the ballet, and Tandy corrects her and says, hey, weren't you at the movies? And Melissa, you kind of are like, did she forget that? And in that moment, I was like, did she forget this because, she has the pill and alcohol issue? Or is she trying to cover something up? Because there was just like a little moment where you could read on her face that she was like, ooh, I better fix this really quick.
Yeah. I guess knowing what happened later on, I would think that, like, whatever the case, if she forgot or if she didn't, if she's like making things up, what we're getting from the show, from the writers, is that things aren't maybe what they seem. Like there are layers underneath, and that's sort of it hints at what's going to go on later when major things come crashing down for Tandy, and we reveal some stuff that we find out later on.
Yeah.
And as for I like that I like that there's in memory of Nathan Bowen box, because in the last episode we had
Oh, the
we
Billy
had something
box.
similar, for Billy. And I kept pausing the video, like trying to figure out what else was in the box.
Yeah.
The only interesting thing I saw was that the movie tickets were still in there, and so that's kind of Melissa kept those tickets, and that's just makes us love her more.
Yeah, I mean, from up until this episode, at the end of this episode, you have this one-sided view, and it's kind of a rose-colored Tandy view of what their life was like. So you have like this wonderful father figure, and yeah, he worked a lot, but he was always there for her, and he was such a great guy. And then you have Melissa, who was an okay mom, but she had issues and she kind of messed
Yeah,
everything up, and she keeps
right,
trying to make it better, but she continues to mess it up. Um,
right.
so you have that Tandy view of things, but when you have scenes with Melissa and she's talking and she's really trying to be that good mom, you really get that feel for her, like you want to give her a chance. Because she's such, they bring such life to these characters and they're so well written that, even through those Tandy colored glasses, you understand why Tandy keeps going back to her.
Tandy colored glasses, I love
Tandy
that.
colored glasses. Yeah. So then we're moving on as, Melissa kind of tries to get her story straight, and Tandy says, don't worry, we can say it was at the ballet, and she's trying to, kind of make her mom feel better about possibly not having the best memory in that situation. But then we go back
Right.
over to Ty and his family, and I thought this conversation was cute, but um, Otis, Ty's dad, was kind of trying to tell his wife, like, hey, I want to have my friends over, and she was kind of like giving him the sidelong glance, like, I don't know if you should have your friends over, and I just thought that was such a cute, like, little tidbit between them. And obviously,
Yeah.
friends are, and is it the Red Hawks?
Red
Society?
Hawks, right.
Okay, so he wants to have, the guys, the Red Hawks over, and she was like, the look on her face, she's kind of like, I don't know if you should have them over.
Yeah,
And
I like the whole breakfast scene, like, because they've actually used it almost like a device
yeah.
that to show where the family is.
Hmm.
These breakfast scenes, like before Ty was the one making breakfast,
Yeah.
and in this one we see that, and it stands in contrast to Melissa and Tandy, because Melissa and Tandy, with Tandy bringing the coffee and Melissa not like drinking anything in the morning, like and you get that this sort of warm feeling, like they're trying to come together to remember Nathan during this day.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, over at the Johnson family house, things are a little bit awkward, like they're not in sync with each other, and yeah, I like the way they showed that.
Yeah, I agree. Just that different, like, family roles, family values sort of thing. The two
Yeah,
breakfast scenes.
yeah.
So Otis is trying to ask his wife if he can have his friends over, and Ty is kind of like, whatever, why aren't we even talking about Billy? This is kind of getting to me. But then the doorbell rings, he goes and answers the door, and Andy is there. And like last person I would have expected to show up at Ty's house, and I'm sure he felt the same way. Um, so he's kind of like, hi, what are you doing at my house? And he's like, today's not a good day. And she says to him, today is today for me too. And I really like that line. And I think that kind of
Yeah,
reminded him, like, oh yeah, today is today. And that's the perfect way to put it. And he
right.
says to her, like, kind of trying to say, like, you can't come in because I've never had any girls over. And that was just so cute because it's like, if you guys were just friends and you wouldn't care if your parents met your friends. but he kind of had like this little hesitation, like, they're gonna think that you're my girlfriend, and you know, he has a girlfriend, right? Still, so
Yeah,
parents
who's
have
been
not
in that
met,
house?
right? And she has, and his parents haven't met her yet, so
Yeah.
that might be an interesting, like, what if that's how Evita is introduced to Tandy, like through like, maybe Adina says something like, "Oh yeah, how's Tandy doing?" in
Oh
front of
no.
Evita, yeah. So that could cause a little drama in the future. So, Tandy, of course, is in the house. She gets in the house. You knew that there was no way Ty wasn't going to let her in the house. She was going to convince
Oh yeah.
him
Oh
of
yeah.
letting her.
He had no chance.
No, none. And she says, like, parents love me. And he's like, yeah, I bet they do. So she comes in, and then he's like kind of stuck because all of a sudden both his parents are there, and they're like, hi. And they do this like cute introduction. And of course, Tandy is like, so sweet and saying, hey, I just wanted to come over and make sure Ty was okay. I know that today was the day that Billy passed away. Well, my dad passed away today too. So then they were like, oh, we're so sorry. You're such a sweet friend. So she's kind of building herself up. And I don't know how she does it. When she gets outside and we see what she was actually there for. But I want to go back
Yeah.
and rewatch that scene again and see if she had any chance to do what she did, because I did not see any opportunity for her to grab what she grabbed from the house. Did you?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's good. Just good acting from both of them,
Mm-hmm.
from Aubrey and Olivia, because they were acting without really saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
For Aubrey, I noticed when he saw it was Tandy, when he realized it was Tandy at the front door, like he gives a little bit of a like, oh my God, like like what are you doing here? Like
Right.
he conveys that with like a split second facial expression. And when Tandy comes in, you see she glances down towards where she puts her bag, and I think that's just a quick way for people. Like if you, yeah, well, you have to watch it again though, because
Okay.
it's very easy to miss. But in that split second, she sees the ID on
I
the
missed
table, I
that part.
guess.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and then she puts her bag there, and I was trying to figure if she made the conversation intentionally kind of awkward to get rid of the parents,
Okay.
because when they ask why she's there, I don't know, like I feel like Tandy could have just made something up like, I'm Tyrone's classmate, I'm here to borrow
Yeah, like,
something.
yeah, we're here to grab my homework or group project, whatever. Yeah, you're right. She was
Yeah,
there
but
for that emotional.
yeah, exactly. Right, right. So maybe she was trying to get rid of them so she had
Yeah.
space to do her
I
thing.
mean, she even went so far as to invite Ty in front of his parents over to, um, right, correct? She invited him in front of his parents over to the ceremony that they were having for them later, or did she do that when they walked away?
When right after they walked
Okay,
away.
okay.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, this is a little awkward for us. We're gonna leave these two because they're dealing with heavy emotions right now. Um,
Yep.
and Tandy's so funny because she's there for a purpose, and it definitely wasn't to see Ty, but she genuinely cares about him, and the
Yeah.
sincerity she has when she is inviting him to the ceremony is real. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, you know, how could you even be mad at her for doing what she did? Because she did come over there with good intentions as well. So she kind of like mixed
Right.
that together. But when she leaves, and you don't really like know why she's there, but when she leaves, she has this look on her face that when they're filming her walking out, and you're like, oh, what did she do? And then you pan down, and she's holding Adina Johnson's Roxanne ID in her hand. You're like, oh, that's why you went there. You had to steal her ID, of course. And we found out from Adina's ID that she is an external consultant
Right.
for the community relations Gulf division of Roxxon. So good.
Yeah. And her picture on that is really, really good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So what do you think? I thought she was like some kind of, no, I don't know why. I thought she was some kind of lawyer. So she's not a direct employee of theirs, I guess. because
Yeah,
she's a consultant.
yeah. She might be a
Yeah.
lawyer, or I think she's more like a PR person, where she helps
Okay.
them, basically
Right.
look good in the news. Um,
Okay.
and I think that's why she was involved with the setting up of the charity fundraiser. So
Right. Right.
doing things like that to make them look good in the community. And we know she doesn't work directly for them because in that previous episode she said that Roxanne was her biggest client.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Right.
she does work for them and obviously well enough to have an ID for the building to get in whenever she
Exactly.
needs to get in. Um, I can't remember how Tandy knew that she had that ability, that she worked for them. Maybe she found out when she crashed the gala, the charity gala. Or she just did her research and was able to find out easily that Adina had that contact. Because I don't think that was something
Yeah.
that they like discussed.
I'm trying to remember. She did something with the people at the party entrance, but I can't really remember. I mean, it's very possible that she like Tyrone could have said something, or that
Yeah.
she could have just went there to to see Tyrone, and she just saw her chance.
And she
Right?
just did
Maybe
see
she,
it, yeah.
yeah,
Let's give her that
yeah,
benefit of the doubt. That she really did go over there just for comfort and then saw the ID as an opportunity to get where she needed to go, so she grabbed it. Um,
yeah,
yeah, because we as an audience knew that she had a connection to Roxanne because we were privy to her private phone conversation, and so was Ty.
right.
And maybe that was something that came up in passing. I mean, Roxanne is a big deal between both of their stories, so that definitely could have been something that Ty mentioned to her at some point.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, hey, my
yep.
mom kind of works for them. All right, next scene we see young Tandy, and she's got that one slipper on and she's walking down the street and she's trying to get home obviously after she left the beach. And this is kind of first glance of Tandy's future life, I guess, when she kind of just pulls that person's cell phone out of their bag to use it to call for help. Not necessarily for help, but she tries to call home. So you see that this little, this little 8-year-old, 7-year-old girl is so resourceful even after such a traumatic incident that,
Right.
she basically is going to walk herself home at this point.
Yeah, and this is always remember this is their origin. So we're seeing the origin of Tandy's what do you call them? Her thieving abilities.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I guess she could have just asked for someone to use a cell phone, but she chose to steal it.
Yeah, I
It's
mean, she
very
could have asked
interesting.
anybody for help. This is a little kid who obviously was in a bad situation. She had blood on her. She
Yeah,
was wandering around by herself. She could have asked anyone for help. But I
right.
think that what her dad had told her about holding herself up, even if everything's falling around you, really got instilled in her at that moment. Like, no, I'm going to help myself, and nobody else is going to help me get through this. I'm going to get home on my own.
Yeah.
So I was happy to see that we got that little extra bit, and we'll go into Ty's extra scene in a moment. But we do get another scene with Detective O'Reilly, and she's at the station, and Connors is looking over at her, and he calls her over, and he says, "Hey, isn't this the kid that we saw at the warehouse after, you shot Dwayne? This is the kid who ran away." And she's trying to play it off like, no, no, that's not him. But obviously it was a picture of Ty. And for a criminal artist sketch of not having like a picture reference to go off of, wasn't that an amazing sketch of Ty?
Actually, yeah, you're
Yeah,
right.
I wrote that down in my notes. Like, that is an amazing, spot on sketch of Ty
Pretty good. Pretty
for,
good.
for being a crime scene sketch. Um, so, Detective O'Reilly, like, knows that, oh, crap, Connors knows that something is going on here, and she's trying to steer him off of the path, but he's not buying that. So then we jump over to back to Ty's house, and Otis obviously won the little argument because he got to have his friends over. to the house, and
Yeah.
they had a cute scene where they were kind of making fun of him, like, "Hey, you have this couch and it's so beautiful. How would you even sit on it?" So his friends are kind of teasing him there, but they bring all of their projects over with them to work on, and that includes the cloak. So we got to see
Yeah,
the cloak again, and oh, it looks so cool. They just did such a good job with the cloak, and
absolutely.
oh, this scene was like this was such a it was such a good scene. Well, first Ty was talking to the captain, and I'm sure he has a name, but I did not write it down. Um,
Big Chief. Just call him
Big
Big
Chief, Big
Chief.
Chief. Okay, so Ty's
Yeah.
talking with Big Chief, and he kind of asked him like, "What's the difference between a cape and a cloak?" And he says, "A cape is an add-on to a shirt, but a cloak hugs
Right.
you." And thought that was like a cute little scene between them. And then Otis comes over and Otis takes the cloak, and obviously in his emotion because it's the day it happens, and we know that Billy had started making that cloak. He takes it and Ty's kind of like, "Hey, where are you going with my cloak?" And he follows him off to the side, and Otis is holding it, and he's got like a tear on his face, and you're like, "Oh, my feels." He's like he's having a moment where he's remembering his son.
Yeah, especially on that day, right? Like, I
Yes.
think anything would like trigger him as long as anything that belonged to Billy would trigger him. Um, did you? I actually looked for it because I didn't like the explanation that Big Chief gave about the
No?
differences between. Because I mean, obviously I like it, but it's like,
Yeah.
really, what is it? So I actually looked. Do you want to know?
Yeah.
Okay, so a cape is like just there for fashion, just for looks, and it's shorter, like what
Okay.
Superman would wear, right?
Okay.
And a cloak is there for function to protect you from whatever the element. Usually it's longer. So
Okay.
a lot of them come with a hood. So that's of
Okay.
course the
Yeah,
big
so
difference.
that's funny because I was watching this with my husband and he was not satisfied with that explanation of the difference between a cape and
Right?
a cloak either.
Had
So he kind of looked at
to
me and
look.
was like, "Just so you know, a cape is like just a cape, but a cloak has a hood with it." And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, there you go.
I give both explanations. Like, yeah, that's true that the cloak does have the hood, and obviously that's an important part of Tyrone's costume. So we got that little lesson there for Big Chief. The real difference between a cloak and a cape.
Yeah. Big Chief's explanation sounds nice,
Yeah.
but come on, give
Yes.
us some facts, man.
Oh. So then, we don't really have time to take with Otis and his tears and his feels over the cape because Ty gets a text message and it's from Detective O'Reilly. It's like, ugh, uh-oh, what's going on?
Dude,
And she
like
says, like, "I'm
it, it
outside."
it's so in character for Tyrone, but it's just funny that Detective O'Reilly's name on his phone is just Detective O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Like he didn't even bother to hide it. Like it's some. I mean, obviously it's like some big thing that he doesn't want his parents to find out. Like he could have put
Yeah.
any name on
That's
it.
that's a
It's like
good thing
Detective
to
O'Reilly.
point out. Yeah, like,
So
he
Tyrone, right?
he goes outside and freaks out like, what are my parents gonna think of there being a cop at my house? But you're completely right. Like, what if they grabbed his phone and was like, "Who's Detective O'Reilly? Why are you talking to a detective?" He could
Seriously.
have just left it as O'Reilly. They wouldn't have known any better.
Any name.
Yes. Yes.
But
That's a good
hey,
point.
naive. Love you.
Ty goes outside and he's like, "What are you doing at my house?" And she's like, "Hey, Connors is after you. You need to lay low. You need to back down." And he kind of stands up to her and was like, "No, I'm not going to
Yeah.
back down." And she says to him, "Let me handle it." And he's like, "I've let you handle it this far and you haven't done shit." And I was kind of like, that's kind of harsh,
Ooh.
Ty.
Mhm.
You don't know her life. You haven't been following her around. Um, but he says to her, "This guy killed my brother. I'm not going to just lay low. I don't care if he's after me." And he's like, "This is the day." And O'Reilly says, "I know." And he's kind of like, "Well, how do you know that?" And she's like, "Well, I can tell because Connors is acting like especially on edge today. So I figured that this was something." So Ty's like, oh, is he bothered by the fact that he killed my brother 8 years ago today? Oh, well, I'll make sure that this is a day he never forgets. So then
Yeah.
Ty starts getting his really cool plan in motion.
Right.
But before we go into that scene, we get that scene with little Ty. God, and that actor, he's so good. I gotta grab his name. But he's walking through the streets of New Orleans and he comes across the tour, and that's Auntie, right? That was
Yeah.
giving the tour. That was so cool.
Yeah.
Like, what a cool tie-in. I wonder if she like realizes that that little kid
I
she saw
know.
on the street was the same person who she made the creepy 3D printing of. Um, but Ty is kind of listening to her, and she's talking about a blood transfusion, and he's like, "What's that?" And she tells him it's giving your blood to another. And you think that like, little Ty is kind of like getting this idea of maybe I could save my brother by giving him a blood transfusion, but Auntie's talking about a story of ghosts, and she says to him, "You don't need to be afraid of ghosts. Only spirits looking to settle a score want to harm somebody, and that ghosts are there to right a wrong." So I think that
Right.
tied in really nicely with the title of the episode, Ghost Stories, and especially going into the next scene we had with that was interspersed Ty and Tandy, like what are they doing? But in Ty's scene, in the future, we get to see real literally that he's bringing that ghost of his brother back to life. So, he's using that information that we got at the beginning of the episode that he looks a lot like Billy, and he's bringing his powers into this idea. So we can see him, he's got a shirt and he's cutting holes in it and he's putting, fake blood on it to get that impression that this was the shirt that Billy was shot in. And he's putting that all together with his cape. And you're like, what are you doing? I know you're going to go scare Connors, whatever is happening in this scene. But at that point, I was really excited that it was going to include the cloak.
Yeah. And just my thoughts on the flashback thing
Yes, absolutely.
with the young actor. Man, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
His name is like hard to say. It's like I want to say Maseo. Maseo.
Okay.
I feel like the reason why they included the transfusion thing, and this is just all theory, of course, but I think
Okay.
we know who's gonna get it at the end of the season. The one will die part of the
Oh, look
prophecy.
at you bringing that back together.
Yeah, but I
know.
don't know, maybe like because Auntie's story was about some guy sacrificing himself to save the one he loved.
Mm-hmm.
So we might see that as a callback to something that'll happen in like episode 10 when if Ty sacrifices himself to save Tandy or whoever. So just something to think about.
Oh, I don't want to think about that. That's way too heavy.
It's coming. It's 2 weeks, man.
Okay, so that's way too heavy emotions, and then yeah, we only have 2 episodes left, so I'm gonna choose not to think about that. But that is really good theory. We're gonna shelf that and talk about it when we have to, because I like that theory a lot.
Yeah.
So we have Ty making his Ghost Billy outfit that he's gonna use to scare Connors into a confession. And
Right.
that's juxtaposed with scenes with Tandy. And at first I was really confused
Yeah.
why she had scuba gear. But then
Right.
she explains it later on. So we find out later on that she has an actual piece of the rig that exploded. So she got scuba gear from somewhere and then dove down to where
Oh
the
my
rig
God.
had been and grabbed the piece of the melted rig.
Holy shit. Okay, so you have to explain everything to me because I did not get too much from the whole her part of the montage. So, because I was wondering where that thing came from, that piece.
Right.
I thought it was in the safe. That I don't know. Greg got it somehow, but I don't know how Greg would get it. So
Right.
she got it herself.
She got it herself because she's badass. Like,
Oh my
so
God.
I'm watching that scene, and I was more preoccupied with Ty. I was really
Nice.
excited with the cloak, so I had to watch that scene like 3 times. But I was like, what is she doing? She had dropped scuba gear on the floor, and I was like, where this is gonna come into play, but I have no idea like what that meant. And she puts a piece of something on the table, and it says Roxanne on it. And I thought
Yeah.
it was a hard drive at first glance. Like, that's what I wrote
Okay.
out of my notes. I thought it was a hard drive
Yeah.
that Nathan had in his safety deposit box. But we find out later that it was actually a chunk of the rig, and she grabbed it because she needed to prove that the rig had actually melted in the explosion. So it was a piece of melted rig that she obtained by using scuba gear to dive down in the water and grab herself.
Wow.
Right.
I can say anything and you win this week. So
Oh no, that Tandy wins. Let's go with that. Because obviously she used her daggers, because we learned this week as well that her daggers can cut steel.
holy shit.
So
Yeah.
she used her daggers to cut that piece of the rig off and hauled it up to
Right.
the surface and was like, cool, I got this.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. So she has that. We see the letter, and she takes the letter out. And what's cool about the letter is that it has all of.
Wait, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you. And
go ahead.
it's interesting because she, what episode was that? End of episode 4, was it? When she like jumped off the pier?
Right.
And we don't know how deep she went because her feet were way down.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe she saw, I don't know, maybe she saw some wreckage down there, and that's when and she gets the idea later on. She remembers that she saw something down there in that episode,
Yeah.
and she's like, "Ooh, that's a thing. I can go back and get whatever I saw down there."
Yeah. Or like.
So maybe she didn't go so deep because don't you need training for that and stuff? So maybe she saw
Right.
something.
You
Yeah.
do. Like, you're absolutely right. You can't just scuba dive. You can't just put the
Yeah.
gear on and be okay. So
Interesting.
I don't know, and like, wouldn't it be dangerous down there? Because, well, would assume that Roxxon would have cleaned it up, so they would have had to have like contained the energy from the explosion in some fashion. But I don't know, how she did it, but I was so confused about what that scuba gear was until she was later on when we see everything get tied together. Like, oh wow, okay, girl, you go and get that piece of the rig.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. So she has that piece of the rig and she has the letter. So we're looking at the letter and Nathan's voicing his concerns, but it also importantly it's signed not just by Nathan Bowen, but Ivan Hess's signature is on there as well, and so are their fingerprints. So that would be pretty hard to fake because it has both
Right.
their fingerprints and their signatures on it.
Right.
She has that letter. She has that piece of the rig, and then she's looking at blueprints with Adina's ID to kind of make a plan for, once she gets in the building, where is she going to go? What is she going to do?
Right.
So that scene setting up for later, looking back at that, we knew Tandy is a badass, but Tandy's a badass. So then we jump into a scene with Ty, and he's with O'Reilly and Officer Fuchs, and they're at his house. And he's like, hey, I got this super amazing plan. I'm going to be Billy, and I'm going to scare Connors into confessing. And they're like, that's not a super good idea. That's not going to work. You're going to end up getting killed. And he's like, but I have this really cool thing I can do. And I couldn't believe at that point that he was going to show them. Could you?
Yeah, there were actually like theories going online if he actually was gonna show it to them, because the way they cut the trailer,
Yeah.
you never see Tyrone and O'Reilly in the same scene when he says that. So I thought it was like, or people were thinking that it was like a misdirect and that he wouldn't actually show his powers because it's kind of soon. I mean, you trust, or he trusts O'Reilly, right?
Yeah.
Based on what Tandy told him before, and he knows that they have like a mutual enemy in Connors, and he takes O'Reilly's word for like her vouching for Officer Pancakes, and it's just so funny because you always get a moment in a superhero TV show where I'm sorry, for certain superhero TV shows, especially with the ones like, say, the Marvel ones, the Netflix ones, where
Mm-hmm.
everything is so realistic, and we talked about this last week with Cloak and Dagger.
Yeah.
It's so there's a lot of naturalism going on, and you almost forget that they have powers.
Yeah.
And there's that moment where you have to just jump in, like, okay, now we're gonna we're gonna start doing the superhero stuff, and sometimes that can get awkward
Yeah.
because it's like super realistic, and then bam, people are gonna be teleporting and moving forward. A lot of people, there's gonna be costumes and stuff, and yeah, for me, I feel like they did as good a job as they could
Yeah.
here.
I agree with you. That's a good
But
explanation.
it's always awkward. It's always awkward when
Yeah.
the guy like says, "I'm gonna show you something," and this is weird, and he pulls out the cloak,
Yeah.
and Officer Fuchs is like, "What's going on?"
I like Officer
He's-
Pancakes. I did see that on Twitter, and that is an excellent name for Officer Fuchs, Officer Pancakes.
Yeah, no Fuchs given. That's
Yeah.
what I like
Oh,
too.
yes. Oh.
No Fuchs given.
But that's a great explanation because you're right. This show is based so much in reality, and you get tied up in the reality that you have to remember that, hey, this is a superhero world as well where they have power. So how are you going to introduce that where it's not weird? And you're right. They
Yeah.
did do a really good job. He
Great.
did introduce his powers to somebody he trusted, so Detective O'Reilly. I was worried that he was taking a huge leap of faith with Officer Fuchs because at this point, I still was on the fence about him. I still wasn't sure if he was really working with Connors or not. They had
Right.
like interesting interactions between the two of them, kind of like sidelong glances, and it's like, are you looking at each other that way because, you're on opposite sides and you know something's up with either one of them? Or is it because you're working together and you're trying to gauge each other? So I was still like going back and forth, so I was really nervous for Ty to show his power. But I did like the way they cut that scene because it's funny when he's like, I have this cloak and I have this really cool power and I want to show you what it is and I think I can control it with this cloak, and you're like, cool, they
Yeah.
really tied the cloak in with his
Yeah.
power, he's going to be able to control it. And then you have this like thought in the back of your mind, like, what if he can't? And he ends up looking really silly in
Embarrassing.
front of them. Yeah. But then they cut, so it was like, oh, okay. I hope that worked out for you, Ty. But it did. It did end up working. But there was a cute exchange, and I wrote this down. I'm glad I looked down at my notes, between
I know what you're gonna
Officer
say.
Fuchs and Ty, where he was
Yeah.
like, haven't you guys read The Telltale Heart? And he was like, oh, well, maybe I read the abridged version. And Ty's like, it's a short story. That was such a good line.
So funny.
That was a good. Oh, that makes my heart hurt a little bit more remembering that. That was a good little comic relief that we had in the middle of the episode.
Yeah.
So we're caught out there. We don't get to know if Ty really controlled his powers or not. We're taken then to a scene with little Tandy, and she ends up making it home, and she has to let herself into the house, and she finds her mom passed out on the couch with pill bottles and alcohol bottles around her, and little Tandy has to call 911. So after everything she's been through, the car accident, her dad died, she had to wander home on her own. She gets home and finds that her mom is almost dead on the couch.
Right. So thank you for. I was actually going to ask you about that. So that was an emergency for Melissa. Like something
Yeah.
was wrong with her, right? She had too much. Okay.
He couldn't
All right.
pick her up.
Right.
And you got the sense that that wasn't the first time that Tandy had to call 911 on her mom before.
Yeah, she knows her thing.
Yeah, which is sad. And then before you
Yeah.
know what you know at the end of the episode, you're just like, man, how can this mother treat her little girl like this? This is so sad.
Yeah, and I have a question, another question about that scene.
Mhm.
You mentioned her like young Tandy had like blood on her foot, and was that just from walking around?
I don't know. I think that was something I saw. Maybe I'm remembering incorrectly, but I thought she had a little blood on her foot, like one of her feet, or both of her feet. That could have just been from walking around because she didn't have her shoe. And the only
Yeah.
thing she had was her ballet slippers, so that's not going to offer very much street protection anyway.
Right. I just didn't know that you could like get that because there was a lot of blood,
And
and I didn't know you could get that just walking around.
it could have been too from when she was pulled out of the car.
Oh, like she just cut
Maybe
that there. Yeah.
glass or something.
Yeah, but it's so sad, right? Like just the imagery of
Yeah.
little girl in her ballet outfit and with a bloody foot.
And nobody stops to help her. Like, nobody walking
Yeah.
through the street sees this little girl and is like, oh my god, are you okay?
No.
But
Oh man.
she made it home by herself. So then we're taken to older Tandy. And, older Ty is trying to show off his powers. Older Tandy already can control her powers, and she's already using them, so she's sneaking into Roxxon. And then we get these interspersed scenes. So Tandy's scenes were cool. She's going into Roxxon and she's sneaking in with Adina's ID and she's using her daggers to cut the power in the building. And we're shown that Peter Scarborough is in the building and that he seems to be the only one in the building. So I don't know if this building was like a new building they were constructing or if this was like way after hours and nobody's there because nobody was even at the front reception desk. But Peter Scarborough happened to be there.
Right.
We get the scene of Tandy cutting all the power lines. She cuts the power to the escalator. And I'm going to come back to Ty's scenes because those were like my favorite of the episode. But Tandy's cutting the power. Peter's like, what the hell's going on? I'm going to get on my phone and find out what's happening. And then all of a sudden Tandy appears behind him and she's got the dagger to his throat.
Right.
So we're like, okay, Tandy succeeded in kidnapping. Don't know where she's going to go from here, but she succeeded in kidnapping Peter Scarborough.
Right.
Now, Ty's scenes gave me the chills. Okay, seeing Ty in his cloak fully appear with the Dark Force energy coming in the cloak, like, I was watching that and I was like, out loud, I was like, oh my god, Butch is gonna just freak when he sees the scene because it was so powerful and it's just so amazing. That cloak, the style of it and the beadwork on it looks so good.
Yeah.
On Aubrey, and the way that Aubrey like just kind of stands there and knows that he doesn't even need to really move to have the presence of Cloak.
Yeah.
I got the chills just talking about. So cool. That was just so well done. But he appears behind Connor and he grabs his gun. And then, we go through this scene of Ty kind of making Connors feel like he's crazy. Then he puts the gun back, but he actually ends up behind Connors and touches him to show him the fear, and the fear obviously was of him killing Billy. So he wanted to like bring that memory back in to play for him. So then this kind of answered another question I had of, do they remember, well, obviously for Ty, but do they remember or do they realize what happened to them after they've been touched? So Ty touched Connors and brought back that fear of Billy. So I guess he brought it like present to mind so that Connors would think about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
The same thing happens with the hopes, like it brings it to the forefront so that they don't necessarily know that something happened to them, but they're getting that hope, that memory just kind of like brought to the forefront of their mind to think about it.
Yeah, it's kind of complicated because especially when like we see later Melissa, she gets both of them, right? She gets the hope and the fear.
Yeah, so like
kind
doesn't
of
know what happened to her.
Yeah, and then I don't know, like you can, but we know that there's an effect, right? Like they know something happened. We just don't know how. At this point, we don't know how much they know, right? Like we just know that they at the very least they get confused, or if you're like Kev from last week, they run away.
Yeah.
It's 2 weeks ago they run away, and it gets heavy, and yeah, for sure. What we got out of it was more confirmation, I guess, that it's definitely on Connor's mind. The whole thing with Billy, like we're getting confirmation that he's thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think if that's your fear, because I think that um, yeah, you're right. No, it is confusing. Like, is it your biggest fear or your biggest hope that Tandy or Tyrone will see, or do
Yeah.
they control it? Can they like put images
Right.
in
Can
someone's
they
head?
recall a specific memory? So was
Yeah,
Ty able to put that memory at the forefront of Connor's mind, or did he just know that he was thinking about it on that day?
right. And then we're getting that confirmation, and also we're seeing how much more powerful they can be, that
Hmm.
they can influence this ability they have, and that they are getting more powerful. We're getting more hints of their control, because Tyrone isn't just a passive like participant in the fear sequence.
Right. Yeah, he didn't just like accidentally touch him and was viewing it. You're right in saying he was actively, trying to put this fear at the forefront of his mind.
Yeah, so good
Yeah,
writing.
yeah. Oh, the writing in the show is just amazing. Week after week, the writers just bring these amazing things for us to talk about in the podcast and speculate on. So we thank you guys for that. But we get that scene of we know Connors is afraid of this memory,
Hmm.
and then we have Ty appearing and reappearing. And then O'Reilly shows up and she gives Connors another sketch. And they're kind of like down at the dock area, is what I understood, like in that
Yeah,
location where Billy was shot. So
yeah.
she gives Connors another sketch, and it's obviously not of Ty, it's of somebody else. And she is playing, and Connor says to her, like, this is not the same person. And she's like, yeah, it is. It's the same person. So she's kind of playing off, like, what are you talking about? Are you crazy? This is the same person.
Yeah.
Um, so at that point, you're like, okay, Ty must have been able to show them his powers, and they're all playing along. This is cool. What's going
Right.
to happen?
Here we
Um,
go.
yes. So, and here we go indeed, because then Ty starts showing up. And I think my favorite part of that scene was where O'Reilly was walking with Connors, and she's kind of like, are you okay? And then he's like, I've seen this kid before. And all of a sudden, Ty is standing in front of him in the cloak, dark force energy around him, and Connors is like, oh shit, he's like right in front of us. And O'Reilly's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, oh my god, this is such a good scene. Like, O'Reilly obviously can see him, but did such a good job of playing off to Connors. So the actor acting that she doesn't know what's going on. And
Right.
that was really cool.
It's it yeah, and it's all part of Tyrone's plot, and again, good writing that they didn't have to make that explicit. Like you get it, like, oh, she's playing along. Oh, and the way she mentions Officer Fuchs, like, oh, he's playing along too, which means, Tyrone's powers work. They're planning, but they never had to do that scene because it
Right.
all ties together and makes sense.
Right, they didn't have to be like, "Oh my God, your powers, like how do you do this?" We didn't have to go into that explanation of like why is this a thing in reality? It's just accepted. It's just okay, this is something he can do. Let's try to use this to our advantage. And that was what we were getting out of these scenes. And we can continually see Ty, and he was saying, I think I can control my powers with this cloak. And in these scenes with Connors where he was appearing and disappearing and then tricking him and trying to pull him through the maze of cargo
Yeah.
around them, we got to see that that's true. He is able to control his power. So finally, after 8 episodes, we've got confirmation that not only Tandy can control her powers, but Ty can control his powers for sure as well. So we got some of that in episode 7, where we knew he had gotten better using his powers, but now he has
Right.
the cloak and he can actually control what he's doing. So they're going through the different scenes, and I'm reading my notes and I'm just laughing because it's interspersed with Detective O'Reilly asking Connors, like, are you feeling okay? Like, are you sure this is
Yeah.
okay? And Connors is running around chasing Ty in his cloak and shooting at him, and Ty is appearing and reappearing. And then Ty appears in front of him and he's like, you know who I am. So then that's when we're really getting to the he's playing off that he's Ghost Billy. And then he pulls that bullet out. And did you see in the scene where he was like, I'm gonna use this bullet that I got from Connors like a couple episodes ago when he was shooting at him?
Yeah.
The bullet came
Like
with
episode 2, I think.
yeah, something like that. Episode 2 or 3.
And they bring it
early
back.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like pulls the bullet out like, oh, you shot me, but I can't die. Like that was awesome how they brought that back in.
Yeah.
So then,
That whole scene was awesome.
yes, Connors is like, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on. I see you and you're here. And then Ty is trying to tell him, you shot me. Don't you remember what happened 8 years ago? And he's trying to get that confession out of you. And finally, he does get the confession of Connor saying, I shot you. I thought, the rig exploded. And and I don't know if he said that or if I'm just putting this interjection in, but I think that when the rig exploded, he thought that Billy was shooting at him, so he shot at him. I think there was an innocence behind the shooting, but it was handled completely wrong, obviously.
So you think that it was completely an accident for Connors to shooting Billy?
I think Connors was totally nervous. I think he was a new cop. I think this
Right.
was like his first chase. He assumed Billy had a gun because it was something he racially assumed out of him. And then
Yeah.
when he heard that rig explode, I think in his mind, in his scared, unexperienced mind, he thought that it was a gunshot. And that's why he had that, trigger instinct to say, I'm going to shoot back because that's what we do. And he
Right,
shot him for
right.
no reason.
But that's the thing though. For me, like I was trying to find like the good of Detective Connors for a while,
Yeah.
and a lot of people were like saying that was online. Even some people were saying, "Oh, that was an accident. He was startled by the big explosion." But he shot him twice though, so that's the thing. That's the only thing that makes me think like, and I don't obviously I've never been a policeman or anything like that, so I don't know the training that they have, but.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing for me. Like 2 shots is like this. The second one, like, is that enough? Like the big sound or this that you'd be so scared to get someone twice, right?
Yeah, and I don't know either because I don't know police training. Like, are you supposed to shoot twice? I have no idea. I think that I don't know. I'm still on the fence, like, because I'm not like necessarily looking for good in him because I don't like him as a character. Like,
Right.
he's a bad guy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
J.D. Evermore plays him very well as being an unlikable bad guy. So,
Oh yeah.
I don't want to make excuses for why he shot Billy because it was completely wrong of him to do so. But I think that he
Yeah.
had
You're
a
right.
stereotype in his mind. I think he was scared.
Yeah.
I think he was a new cop, and then all of a sudden this huge explosion happened that nobody could have predicted, and it startled him enough because he was so inexperienced to then shoot, and that ended up killing Billy, who had no weapon on him, who had nothing to do with anything. And
Right.
Connors was kind of like, I shot you. And then we get confirmation that, he says, my uncle helped me out after it happened and he got me into Vice, which I think is something that we discussed on one of our earlier episodes. So we got confirmation that that is what happened.
Yep.
And he was kind of like, at this point, he was kind of like, well, yeah, I shot you. It happened a long time ago. Like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, he was almost getting ready to kind of get an attitude with what he thought was a ghost. Like, I didn't feel like he was gonna apologize to him for shooting him, Like, okay, so, like, if he did accidentally shoot him in those circumstances, even though it was wrong, if it was an accident, he didn't seem remorseful to me at all. Did you get any remorse from him? He was kind of just, like, stating facts,
No.
like,
Yeah.
I shot you, and then my uncle totally helped me cover it up, and now I'm a vice cop.
Yeah. I agree. That's not the vibe I got. It was more like stop hassling me, man. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I did it.
Like,
And
yeah, it
that's also
happened.
that's an interesting way to, because that's what Ty wanted. He was like trying to push his buttons, I guess, like,
Yeah.
like
Like,
kept bringing it up and with everything. Yeah.
if you had that on you, if you had that weight of killing somebody in a completely wrong situation, and then you made it even more wrong by covering it up and lying to his family and making them believe that he was this drug dealer and that's why he was shot and he got shot that way, you would have some sort of weight. And if you come across a
Right.
ghost of the person that you killed and was, had this about, you'd expect for him to like at least be like, I'm so sorry. What can I do to amend this? There was no like groveling at the knees kind of thing, like like please help me, like fix this. He was kind of like, whatever, ghost. What do you want me to do about it now? Like everything's cool for me. I'm a vice cop. It got taken care of. So
People are different.
yeah.
Some
So then
people like run towards their fears, and some people are say sorry, and I would be screaming and going the other direction. So
right, or like just like at that point just like on your knees begging like please don't, do whatever you're
yeah,
gonna do to me, ghost.
yeah.
um he
He's like
kind of just
irritated.
looked at him and was like whatever. And then Ty is standing in front of him, and Ty like gets it at that point. He's like, this guy's a dick, basically. Like he's not going to be remorseful. At least he admitted what happened. So he admitted what happened, and then Ty all of a sudden is like, "You got that?" And then out of the woodworks comes Detective Connor or Detective O'Reilly and Officer Pancakes, and he's holding his camcorder and he's got the confession on tape. And then Detective O'Reilly puts Connors under arrest, and Ty has that moment of vindication, like I did it. And I
Hmm.
wasn't expecting this, to be honest. I wasn't expecting them to like get that on tape and have him be arrested. Going
Oh, really?
forward, seeing what they're
Yeah.
bringing into the show because of this,
Right.
I get it. I like where they're going with it.
Okay.
But I kind of thought that they were going to drag this out a little bit longer.
Okay. So you thought, but I actually wish they like dragged it out a little bit longer the other way. Like I wish that I don't know if that was even possible with structures, story structure and stuff. But I wish like me it would have been cooler if Ty was like haunting him for 2 or 3 episodes.
Yeah, like continual
Y-
haunting.
Yeah. So you see the Connor's like breaking down instead of just one episode where it kind of felt
Yeah,
rushed. But I mean the whole episode like so much happened.
right.
Like plot wise, it's so backloaded this first season, which of course was intentional. They wanted lots of development early on in introducing the characters,
Yeah.
but yeah, with this one it went by really fast. Like the whole episode for me, very fast.
Yeah, and I agree. And again, like when I've seen from what we've seen from the previews and what we know from the end of the episode, I like the direction that it's going in. So I get it. Like, they don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to see beat a dead horse, but it has been 8 episodes where we're like, hey, we know this cop is dirty and we know what this cop did, and let's get him for this. So Ty got to have his moment of satisfaction, his moment in the sun, as it were, where he got
Right.
to fulfill something. So that was an awesome moment for him to be able to
Mhm.
have that. And I think that he felt really vindicated. And then to have Detective O'Reilly there really solidifies the trust and the relationship that they have together,
Mhm.
which is good. I think that'll be a good plot device moving forward because I really like her character.
Yeah. Yeah. I have like a gripe with the scene, just a very small thing. I wish that he pulled the his cloak forward more to kind of hide his face a little bit more. Because I mean, Aubrey kind of looks like, ooh, what's his name? Whatever. The actor of, I mean, Ty looks like Billy, kind of.
Yeah.
But but in the clear light, like you can tell it's a different person. Like, why would the ghost change his appearance? I think, and I just wish that, and the device was there. Like he had the hood
Yeah.
to kind of like hide his face. Maybe you could just see his jaw or a little, just to sell that idea that it's not Aubrey Joseph, not Tyrone we're looking at. It's
Yeah.
Billy's ghost.
And
Because,
maybe they had to do that because, you know, Connors is not going to necessarily remember exactly what Billy looked like because it was 8 years ago. But he is going to have an idea of what he looked like. So maybe Ty looked enough like the idea of Billy. And I think that they really set that up in the very first scene
right.
where, little Billy was like, when am I going to be you? And he's like, yeah, you're going to be just like me, but you're going to be better. And they kind of set that all up. So I think they had to have his face show in that sense to Connors so that he really believed like this isn't just some guy standing here in a cloak. This is really the ghost of the guy I shot.
Yeah, and you were saying that you were thinking that maybe Connors is just a prejudiced asshole, and
Right.
and for him to think that Ty and Billy are the same person, that
Like
kind
it's
of
not too
enforces
much of a
that.
leap of faith for him, given his character.
Yeah. You're right.
Yeah. So I don't want to give Connors any more benefit of the doubt. So then we have Ty, he got vindicated. So then we go back over to Tandy. And Tandy has Peter Scarborough duct taped to a chair. And it's funny because, like I said, I was watching this with my husband, and my husband was like, wow, she got him duct taped to a chair. Like, she's really badass. I'm like, you don't even know how badass Tandy is. So she has Peter tied to a chair, and she shows him the memo, and he's like, well, whatever, that can be faked. And she's like, not really. And you're like, no, it's got their fingerprints on it and their signatures. Like, this can't really be faked.
Yep.
And then she shows him the piece of the rig because he was like, well, you can't prove that it wasn't just an
Right.
explosion, that it was actual like a thermal meltdown. And she's like, yeah, I can. And she takes out that piece of melted rig and puts it on the table, and she's like, here it is. And that's when I made that connection that like, damn, she dove down to get that piece of rig, and she totally cut it off with her sweet daggers that can just cut anything.
She was like laying it on thick here. Like she was like so
She's
fierce
like,
and
this is my moment. I'm gonna get
yeah,
redemption for my dad in this moment. Like everything in the past 7 episodes has come up to this point for me.
yeah,
And like Olivia is such an amazing actress. We talked about last week how she doesn't need to be in like tons of makeup. She doesn't need to be in crazy clothing. She was
yeah,
just Tandy in herself because her acting skills are so amazing. She was able to really pull that scene off with emotion and not have to bring in, extra to it. She didn't need extra because she's such a good actress. And she was
yeah.
able to get us with the emotion. So then Peter's kind of like throwing hints at her, though. He's like, she's saying to him, I want to clear my dad's name. I want my dad's good name back, and you guys ruined it. And he kind of says to her, like, how well did you know your dad?
Mm-hmm.
And throws that little jab at her, and you're like, hmm. Like, even though, like, this guy is a terrible guy, he's even worse than Connors, or on the same level at least.
Yeah.
And I don't want to believe anything he says, but didn't that kind of get you? Because, like, how well do we know Nathan? We only know what we know Tandy knows.
Yeah, that's true. And from the little bit that Mina said, which
Hmm.
which is information from her dad, and then I realized like, oh, it's all just related to his like intelligence. Like
Right.
we don't know. I mean, we know a little bit, but it's all like a sense. I think we love Tandy, and we're like, and she loves her dad, and we're like, oh, the dad must be a good person. Like he picked her up at the ballet, but that's all he did, and that's what dads do.
Right.
And he was late. But yeah, he's a smart guy, and he was giving warnings, but we never about the rig. But was it like we never see like is it because he wants to make sure that people's lives are saved or the environment doesn't get jacked, or is it just he's just doing his job and he's really
Right.
good
Like,
at his
does he
job?
just
He's like
want to be
super smart.
right? Yeah, like,
Yeah,
we don't know about him. We literally only know what we know about him from Tandy's experience, so what we've seen from Tandy and what we
yeah,
can see being protected by Melissa. So she has,
Yeah.
she's been fighting for her husband's name,
Oof.
and she, you get that sense that she's doing that all for her daughter. Not necessarily that she wants to restore the family name. It's more like, I need to do this for my daughter. So that's all we know. So then when Peter Scarborough throws that
Right.
out there,
Right. Right.
how well do you really well Nathan? Well, we don't really know him very well. So that kind of like got my sensors a little bit. But then it's like, well, he could just be being a bad guy, being a bad guy. And Tandy,
Yeah.
Tandy pushes that aside. She's not going to let anything throw her off. And Peter at that point is offering her money. She's saying, I'm going to the press basically with all this, and everybody's going to know the truth. And he's like, I can give you a ton of money. How would you like to have this money so that you and your mom never have to worry about anything ever again? And then she scoffs at the money, and she's like, I don't want that. I want to restore my dad's name. Um, and then she kind of gets mad at him. She's like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. I'm just telling you that your company's over, basically. So she leaves him
Yeah.
tied to the chair. She takes her dagger and slices one of those huge metal beams just to scare
Holy
him.
shit.
Really. Yeah. He's like, I should probably get out of here.
That was
And
so
then
well
she
done
leaves.
too.
Yeah. And she's like, I gotta get to, my dad's ceremony. But in that moment, she had her moment of vindication. She left Peter Scarborough tied to a chair in a dangerous situation that she created for him, having told him, I'm about to bring your company down, get ready for it.
Right.
So we had both of those moments of vindication, and there's still like 15 minutes left of the episode, and you're like, oh crap, what's gonna happen? How is this all
Yeah.
gonna come crashing down? Like you have that sense that something bad is gonna happen. So then we jump to a scene with Detective O'Reilly, and they're in the station with Connors, and you get that juxtaposition of Peter Scarborough's duct taped to a chair and Connors is basically handcuffed to a chair in the police station. So they've got him, he's under arrest.
Nicely done.
And yes, and O'Reilly is there with Officer Fuchs, and he's kind of like, hey, what about this thing that Ty can do? Like, what is this? He kind of plays it off like, oh, I'm from New York, I've seen this before, and she name drops her friend Misty. And that's a reference from Luke Cage, correct?
Yeah. A lot of people were like so excited for that. Yeah, she's like Luke Cage's friend, I guess, and there's actually an Easter egg. Um, trying to remember the order of things. There was an Easter egg on the second season of Luke Cage where somebody did mention that like O'Reilly, somebody named O'Reilly who used to work in Harlem, the Harlem police force, moved to New Orleans,
Mm.
and all the fan men were like, "Ooh, who's that? Tie in, Easter egg," and yeah, and here we get the other way. The Cloak and Dagger is paying that back, and we're seeing that even though they're on different networks, Marvel, whoever's in charge, was able to slip those two Easter eggs in,
Yeah.
and now everyone's so excited for maybe we can see Luke Cage and Cloak and Dagger crossover in the future, or something along those lines.
Yeah. So that was cool that they kind of threw that in there. But it also helped with that suspension of reality that we were talking about earlier. It's like, yeah, he has these superpowers, but it's not really a big deal. I've seen this before. So I don't know if she was just kind of like, let's not talk about this here kind of thing, or if she really was just like, it's no big deal. It's fine. This is part of the world. It's all good.
Yeah,
And at that
come here and
point,
kiss me.
yeah. At that point, I still, and I have written down in my notes here, I still wasn't sure if he was good or bad. I still had questions about him, and that's
What?
because this show makes you question everything.
Yeah,
Like,
but the thing with the Telltale Heart and the short story and the funny
no,
and
that
the
was
joke.
hysterical. And then I was like, and that's when it was getting to the point for me where if he was bad, it would hurt me even more because I liked his character. Like I'd liked his
Yeah,
character before, but now I liked him even more because yeah, this guy is good to Detective O'Reilly. He cares about her. He helped Ty out with his vindication for his brother, and they kind of, Connors and Fuchs have this sidelong glance kind of thing going on, and I'm like, what is this? But that's because the show makes you question everything. Like, I'm sad for the way that it ended up, and we'll get to that in a second, but I'm glad that he didn't end up being a bad guy.
Yeah, finally.
I think that would have hurt me more than what actually happened. They left him a good guy, so I was happy for that. So then we jump into the scene where Ty and Tandy they're on the shore, and they're kind of comparing notes for their day and sharing their successes. Like, yeah, I was able to get Connors arrested, and Tandy's like, yeah, I was able to kind of take Roxxon down, like, no big deal, took down a whole corporation, did some scuba diving, it's all okay. So then they kind of have this cute line where they're like, maybe we have a future to look forward to, and I says to her, like, maybe we do, and you're like, yeah, you do.
Uh-huh.
So you get that cute moment, and then all of a sudden Melissa shows up, and you're like, oh yeah, they're here for that ceremony thing. Let's get into that. So Melissa's there, and Tandy has this cute lantern, and they're gonna light the lantern, and Melissa's introduced to Ty, and she's super sweet to him. She's like, I'm really glad you're here. I'm sorry about your brother, but please join us in this ceremony. So it's Tandy and Ty, and Melissa standing between them, and all of a sudden Melissa has this like cute mom moment where she's like, I'm gonna hold both of their hands, and we're gonna have this moment. And you're like, oh God, no, don't touch them. And then
Last thing you want to do.
Her mind, and you're like, oh, what? She took their hand. I wrote in my notes, I'm like, oh my God, she took their hands, and now they're inside of her mind. Like, now what are we gonna see? Because, like I said, there was 15 minutes left of the episode. We knew something was gonna go down, and you're like, this is where it's gonna go down. We're in Melissa's mind. This is not gonna be a good thing.
No.
So Ty and Tandy are in Melissa's mind, and they're standing in front of Tandy's old front door, and they open up the door, and it's not inside of Tandy's house, but it's inside of a movie theater. So to tie those movie tickets in from the Nathan box.
Right.
And Melissa's alone in the theater, and she's watching this movie. And the movie is of Melissa bringing Nathan, who's sitting at, like a dining room table with work around him. She's bringing him a cup of coffee. She sets it down. He's like, thank you. They share this nice kiss. And you're like, oh, that's cute. But then the movie stops, and Melissa's gone, and you're like, okay, this is not good. Like, what about Nathan don't we know? Because now we're really going to find something out about Nathan that we're not going to be happy with. Did you like the way they filmed this scene? Like, wasn't it really cool?
Especially when they went to the black and white stuff.
Yeah, like when Tandy takes her dagger and like cuts the screen.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. No, there's a reason they were using parts of that scene for the previous, right? Because it just looks so nice.
Yeah.
Like just and Olivia was her face and her acting there because she was taking the lead, and it's so just well composed, I think.
Yeah.
It's like very striking imagery, and I remember. Even in the previous, I'm like, how are they gonna end? This is weird. Like, why are they in some empty theater? Like that's.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's gonna come into play. And apparently, it's not reality, and we find out it's all part of the whatever dreams nightmare escape. But yeah, it looks good. Looked good.
Yeah, like it must be weird to fill these like dream, hope, fear sequences. They do such a good job of bringing you into that world. So. The movie stops playing, Tandy goes up to the screen, she cuts the screen because she needs to go deeper into, out of the facade of the movies, we need to go deeper into Melissa's mind, and as she cuts the screen, you're opening up and back into Tandy's actual dining room area. Nathan sits at the table, same scene, Melissa's bringing him a cup of coffee, except the cup of coffee gets spilled all over Nathan's documents. He gets upset, he stands up, Ty and Tandy are watching in the background, and then all of a sudden Nathan just backhands Melissa. And in that moment, you're like,
how did you feel?
I was just... I mean, I kind of knew that that was what was going to happen at that point when they showed him again at the table, and I was like,
Oh,
he's not the guy he seems. As soon as she spilled the cup of coffee, I knew what he was going to do, and I was like, that is so devastating to find out that, like, from Tandy's perspective. So she's watching this and she's like, my dad, who I held on a pedestal and thought he was the greatest thing in the world, beat my mom. And that
yeah,
couldn't have been the only time he did it. And Melissa's reaction was
yeah,
just kind of like, I gotta take this. I'm not gonna fight back. This is just something that happens and I have to get over it. And I think that that was so heartbreaking for Tandy to see, because not only did she see that image of her dad being crumbled, but then she also
right.
gets this new image of her mom, like we were talking about before, like there's a reason why she's addicted to pills. There's a reason why she became an alcoholic. She had some serious secret to hide. And now you start seeing Melissa in a whole new
Yeah,
light.
right. Man,
I know,
I
so
like,
such a deep episode.
yeah, I like the fact that Nathan didn't like hit her like quickly after
Yeah.
she spilled the drink, because then they rule out like it's instinct or he has a
Yeah, you're right. Like it
fiery
was
temper or
just like a
whatever.
one-time, like, oh my God, I'm so
Yeah,
sorry this happened moment thing.
yeah, because he considers it and he's like, oh, and he hits her and like, oh, that's what he does.
Yeah.
And yeah, with going when you like you said, realizing, oh, that's where she started with her addictions, and then you put things together. He's a wife beater,
Yeah.
and I don't know uh, that sort of supersedes anything, right? Like,
Yeah, like I don't care if you're the
even
smartest guy in the world, look what you
yeah,
did to your wife who like does nothing but love and care about you and gave you a daughter.
yeah, that colors everything a certain way, and again, yeah, the acting of Olivia in that scene, and then like you said, our realization that, because before this, my thought on Melissa was, like she copes, she copes, she's found a way to cope, and that was like her saving grace for me, like because Andrea Roth is like super nice, such a nice person
Yeah.
to everyone on Twitter, and like I need to find the good thing about this character, because otherwise she's not the best character around, and now we have like a real, like, she's protective, right? Like
Yes.
she lied to protect the image that Tandy had of Nathan for,
To her detriment. Because look what it did to
yeah,
their relationship.
right. It's so sad.
That's how much she loved her daughter. And it's so sad because, like, if you look at Melissa, and if the drinking and the pills had started after Nathan died, you'd, I guess, like, not have an excuse, but you'd have more of an understanding for that addiction.
Yeah,
But we
yeah,
know that
sure.
the addiction started before he died. We know that, she didn't pick Tandy up from ballet that day because she was passed out on the couch. Like, she had that addiction and there was no real like explanation for it. It just
Yeah,
made her look like a terrible mother. And now
yeah,
in this moment, in the end of episode 8, we see why she has these vices in her life. And you're like, oh my God, like you said, now I need to go back and rewatch all of the scenes with Melissa in every episode and really look at them differently and have a different, feel for her character, because she held that secret. She dealt with it in her own way. It wasn't a good way, but she dealt with it the best way she could. But to uphold that image for her daughter, that was like the most important thing for her.
yeah.
So sad.
Whew.
I know. So then, they come out of the memory, or they come out of her mind, and Ty and Tandy are standing there knowing what they just saw. And Melissa's kind of affected, so like
Yeah,
something happened. But Tandy can't just look at her mom and say, "Oh my God, Dad beat you." Like, how would she explain how she knew that? You know, she'd have to dig into the fact that she has these powers, and she would have to get all into that. And that was not what that moment was about. And to have the
Right.
strength to then take the lantern and light it and send it off, like, she just was like, "We're gonna troop through this," you know.
Yeah.
We saw in the beginning, you know, you if nobody's gonna hold you up, you have to hold yourself up, and she had to continue to do that through this scene.
Right.
So Tandy is like shocked after this, so she's walking away. And my husband pointed out in the scene where Tandy's walking away, he was like, I really like this scene, especially Ty's reaction, because he's so protective of her. But he's protective of her in a sense that he still gave her her space. So she's walking away, she's several
Yeah.
steps ahead of him, she's crying, but he's still concerned about her, so he's just kind of watching her. She turns and looks at him, they kind of share a glance, but he
Yeah.
doesn't like run up to her, he doesn't invade her space, he's just kind of like, I'm gonna let you be, and
There.
I'm gonna make sure
Yeah.
you're okay. And I was like, that is so sweet, like to point that out, that like Ty has that care for her. And I think that's the
Yeah.
kind of care that Tandy needs. Like, not
Yeah.
to space invading, but to just know that somebody is there for her, because she doesn't have anybody there for her.
Ty's everyone's baby, and
Yes.
it's just a perfect way to do it. And again, they're both of the actors like did that scene so well without saying anything. They were just walking and looking, and you can feel the concern and the bond, and that they've built for 8 hours now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's only been that long. That's kind of crazy to think about. Um, yeah, so you get this scene as well while Tandy's walking away, and it's of young Tandy and her mom kind of telling her like, "Do you can't
Oh,
rely
yeah.
on anyone. You know, you have to rely on yourself." And it's this cynical Melissa telling her this, and you're like, "Well, you have every reason to say that, Melissa. Like, we understand now. Like, we get it. We're in your corner." And Tandy makes a decision as she gets to an intersection. She grabs her phone and she calls Peter Scarborough, and she's like, "I'm gonna take that money." And he's kind of like trying to say like, good choice, and she just hangs up on him. So she decides to take the money.
And it's the same intersection that young Tandy was at when she stole
Oh,
the
the
cell phone.
phone, was it? I didn't
Yeah,
make
I
that
think
connection.
so. I was like looking at it. Well, it's the same. It looks a lot like the same building.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out why they do that. I think it's because like they just that's when like young Tandy, that's when she decides to do something bad by stealing the cell phone, and old Tandy, that's when she does something morally questionable when she
Yeah.
decides to take the money. So I think that's the only reason
Ooh.
for something like that, because that's a
Yes.
very deliberate choice, of course, unless
Yeah.
they just ran out of sets. They're like, yeah, we'll just reuse this one. Nobody will notice.
No, that was awesome. Like, good catch on that. I like that. I like that theory on that.
A friend of mine caught that. Yep.
Nice. So then we go
Yes.
into a scene with little Tandy, and I'm sorry, first we start with little Ty, and he's kind of seeing his parents fighting, and this is obviously after Billy died, and
Yeah.
they're saying, you know, I don't feel safe in this neighborhood anymore, and they're kind of fighting, and he's like, I don't know, you know, little Ty doesn't know what to do, but he ends up sleeping at the foot of their bed. And I thought that was just so sad. Like, he was scared too. He needed to sleep at the foot of his parents' bed. And then little Tandy is sleeping on the couch. And, you
Yeah.
know, little Ty is in these, like, I think it looked like galaxy kind of print, but they were darker
Yeah.
colored blankets. And then
Right.
Tandy is in the white. So they still carried their color themes.
Color themes.
But Tandy's just, you know, by herself on the couch. And, you know, that was where their life was 8 years ago, and they're still dealing with that now. So then we fast
Yeah.
forward.
You're right. And sorry, that's the last image we get from those two scenes.
Mhm.
Little young Ty was kind of crying.
Yeah.
And young Tandy was like really fierce. Like she looked hardened.
Yeah.
So and and you're right. That's where we left off 8 years, and that's when we're introduced to them in episode one. That's sort of where they are. Like
Yeah.
Tandy's living this kind of hard lifestyle, and Tai is afraid, and that's where they've been for 8 years, and that's so sad to think about now.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Tandy, then we're in the future, and Tandy has all this money, and she's putting it inside of a statue at the church, and I'm not sure what religious figure that is. I don't know if you caught what religious figure she was putting that money into, but that's where she's storing all of the money.
Right. I'm guessing it's Saint Teresa. I'm guessing. I'm not sure. That might be a callback to a thing in the comic books too, when they used to put drugs in like statues in
Yeah.
during the 80s comic books. So that's interesting that they decided to do that. That's a very deliberate place because, well, then I don't know, maybe there aren't a lot of places to put money in like a church, or some people would maybe be afraid of messing around with religious figures,
Yeah.
but yeah, I like that little extra touch.
Yeah, like the Bank of Tandy in her church.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's where you're gonna keep all your money. Let's see how that goes in the future. Um, and then we got to talk about one of the saddest scenes of the episode where Detective O'Reilly is going to her boyfriend's house and she's like, they're happy because they made this arrest. She's like, hey, let's make pancakes. And you see all this bread on the table, and she's like, oh, you're making a whole bunch of pancakes. And then she goes to the fridge, and Officer Fuchs is dead, stuffed inside the fridge.
When did you know? Like, did you
I
know right away
knew, yeah, in that
that was
scene,
gonna
I
be
knew he was
what it
dead.
was?
Yeah, I was like,
Right.
and I was prepared for. I was like, okay, when they started showing the fridge, I'm like, this is where this is going, and okay, and I thought, like I said, I thought, well, he's dead, but he's not a bad guy, so I can be okay with that. So, obviously he was
Right.
killed because of his involvement in getting Connors arrested. Um, so this is a setup for, hey, you might have caught Connors, but did you really think that this was going to be the end of that? Of course not.
Yeah.
This is bigger
Yeah.
than just Connors.
Yeah. And okay, so it's for me there was very interesting scene because that's like they mentioned this also. Some people are talking about it online. The dead girlfriend in the refrigerator trope.
Yeah.
Uh, and I did not. The most famous example of that I know of happened in a comic book, in like a Green Lantern comic book, and it was I knew about but that's the only or one of like a very few examples of that, and I did not know. But somebody said that was actually the first time, or maybe like that's actually the most famous, one of the more famous examples of it, where yeah you have like your hero, a male hero, comes home, and
Mm.
his dead girlfriend is stuffed in the refrigerator, which is like obviously very traumatic
Yeah.
for the character and for a reader to think of that situation. And throughout this whole season, they've been doing a lot of, like we mentioned before, like a lot of gender swapping with
Yeah.
with O'Reilly, and this was like one of the more like in your face and shocking examples of that. She being the hero in this situation, and dead girlfriend being Officer Pancakes, and
Oh.
yeah, the way they did that too, like it was like nasty, like
Yeah, it was
he
pretty gruesome.
painful death.
Yeah, for
Pretty
sure.
sure.
And I just
Big ref too.
okay, and I just felt, maybe I feel bad about it now, but I just feel like, yes, he's dead, but I'm just so glad that he didn't turn. Like, he wasn't a bad guy. He was a good guy who was out to fight the good fight, and this is what happened
Yes.
to him. They made an example out of him. And this, when they caught Connors, and I was like, really, they ended this already. They ended this storyline. Where are they going to go from here? And now you say, oh, obviously it wasn't just Connors. Like, maybe Connors was a big player in this, but he couldn't have been top guy. So now who is after them, who, they're mad now. Maybe Connors will be not so big of a player in this, but there's got to be somebody above him who's angry
Interesting.
is getting exposed. Because who else would have
Yeah.
the power to like kill a police officer in that sort of fashion? And now poor Ty is mixed up in all the middle of this.
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you think the motivation was? Like, because if it's Connors and we're assuming that he had a part in it, I mean, he's gonna attract more attention to himself, or I don't know, like it's not gonna make his situation better unless maybe his organization or whatever is
Yeah.
sending like a message like, don't do this to one of us, we're gonna mess you up. So
That's what I
it
think
might
it
just
is.
be that.
I think it was like
Okay.
there's a bigger organization and they're now sending messages like we know you and we got you and you can't get away with this. You're not going to shut our organization down. And obviously Ty
Right.
didn't know that this was going to be bigger than what it was, but I don't think Detective O'Reilly even knew like how big this could possibly be. And people tried to warn her along the
Sure.
way, and even Officer
Yeah.
Pancakes tried to warn her like, "Hey, this is like a big thing you're messing with." And she was just kind of ignoring him, just like Ty was ignoring her, and now they're in a situation. And you see the
Yeah.
scenes from next week when Adina kind of puts that all into perspective. She's like, "Hey Ty, hey son, you kind of put yourself in the middle of all this. Like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, now what are we going to do?" And you see, ooh, the scenes from next week's episode look brutal.
I know.
I'm
It
almost
doesn't get
afraid
easier,
to,
man.
yeah, I'm almost afraid to watch next week's episode, but
Yeah.
it's just like I was just left sad after this episode because you had these huge vindicating moments that both of our main characters have been hoping for, and everything has been leading up to the whole season, and then they're just wiped away in two separate scenes. Two separate 5-minute scenes. Our
Yeah.
idea of everything that Tandy was working for is completely trashed, and our idea of what Ty has been working for is
You're right.
opened up into no, this isn't even the beginning of it.
I know.
So now
I mean that's good. We're gonna get more episodes,
yeah,
right? There's
yeah.
more story,
Like
at
kudos
least.
to the writing for that because they could have taken like cheesy ways out, I guess, and they didn't do that. They went for it. Like they didn't have to tarnish Nathan Bowen's reputation, but how much does that add to the story? Like that is just compounding everything we know and giving so many more options to put into the story. And we haven't gotten a confirmation for season 2 yet, but
Yeah.
um, you know, we're recording, it's Friday. This is the Friday of Comic Con. The panel for Cloak and Dagger is happening today. Super excited about that. So I think that we're going to get an announcement for season 2 during their panel. Don't you
You
think?
better, man. We better.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, could
We're
you
gonna get
imagine? Like,
some kind of idea. I can't imagine this show not getting renewed. It's so good. We were talking earlier about, well, first of all, we were talking earlier about how Butch and I both failed to put up anything asking you guys what you thought about this episode on social media, so sorry. We both did a really bad job on that, so we don't have any comments from you guys to read this week. But we were talking about how like much of a following this show has and how much we've enjoyed interacting with all of you on Twitter. And Butch, kudos to you because you are master of our Twitter account. Most of the time, you guys are talking to Butch on there, so thank you for for doing a good job running that account. Um, but I can't imagine the show not getting picked up for a second season.
oh man, everyone's like, I'm sure we're gonna get confirmation because even showrunner Joe Pokaski is like talking about things to look forward to in season 2 already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, when it comes to the community, it's so cool, man. Like, yeah, you're right.
Like,
Like,
how is
I'm
that for
sure.
you, somebody who's been like a fan of the comic books forever, and you have your Facebook fan page, but to now have this, like, how is this for you?
Dude, it's like it's just insane. Like even like a few weeks ago, I was like, wow, there's like a Cloak and Dagger Reddit. Like, how's that a thing?
Yeah.
And coming like every week, especially like during the weekends. Like you'll see a lot of trying Cloak and Dagger. This is great. This is awesome.
Yeah.
Best show ever. Blah blah blah. But lately, it's been like, oh, too many people are recommending Cloak and Dagger. I gotta watch it, or I watch it because of at whoever somebody recommended it. So people are like spreading the word out. And like I said, I haven't confirmed this, but like the ratings, I heard like the streaming ratings are doing really well.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it, but like whatever. I'm hearing numbers like twice what the live viewer. So
Yeah.
after that, there's like a lot of people's, and I guess the audience skews towards younger people who are Hulu subscribers or whatever.
Yeah.
So just doing that and yeah, like the community, like I came across this group of people and just so heartwarming. Like I came across this group last week. I'll shout out a few of them because I've been talking to them at Alex Chatman and at Jam Lesbian. These people, they form like groups and they talk amongst themselves. Like they have like watch parties. Like, is everyone around? Who's here? I'm here. Blah blah blah. And then like in the middle of talking about the episode, like someone like Andrea Roth like shows up and she's like commenting and talking to them, and it's like, oh,
Like, how cool
it's so
is
cool.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, that's definitely something not possible, whatever, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, to have a show, an actual member of the show, like, engaging with you. So yeah, it's nice to see people, and people have their theories, and some of them like I know already, like oh that's interesting, what you're thinking about, blah blah blah, and some of them are like earlier with and I'll say his name now, at J_Jam. He was the one who put the Runaways and Cloak and Dagger TV show connections together, and I didn't even think about that, and so I'm like, that's awesome. Like it has a life of its own,
Yeah.
And I'm very conscious about not being that guy, like not being I've been the fan for 30 years, so it just makes me so happy to see people like enjoy this, and hopefully like what I try to do is like say they're comic books, they're are action figures, they've had cartoon appearances, so if you're liking what's going on, and a lot of people are, and the show is getting better and better, I think.
Yeah.
There's more to it. So, yeah. As in 2 weeks the season's gonna end, and we're gonna have more episodes, of course. We're gonna be talking about, the Cloak and Dagger beyond the show a little bit more. So I'm excited for that.
Ooh, we should call our hiatus episodes that. Cloak and Dagger beyond the show.
Ooh, yeah,
I
like it.
That makes it sound
Beyond
super fancy.
It's so classy.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right, guys. Well, you've been listening to us for almost 2 hours now, so I think we need to give you a break. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. We will definitely put out some thoughts next week and questions to you guys so that you can respond to us so that we can read them on the show, because one of our favorite parts of doing the show is interacting with all of you and helping to build this community. So again, thank you so much for sticking with us week after week and listening in. Ratings, reviews on iTunes, always appreciated. We do have one rating on there, one review on there, sorry, that is a really sweet review of the podcast, so thank you so much for that. But again, any questions, anything you want to see on the show, please hit us up on Twitter. All of our information is in the show notes. Any final thoughts, Butch?
Yeah, that we're in the home stretch. I really loved episode 8. It was sort of a mirror of episode 6, I think, when we have our two heroes on their own separate little missions, and both of them succeeded, and we were so happy. And episode 7 made us so happy with their success there, and that little phone call, and everyone was so happy.
Yeah.
And then we got episode 8, and now things aren't so happy.
In the heart, yeah.
Yeah, but we need this. This is the hard part before it gets better. Hopefully, towards as we race towards the end of the show, and fingers crossed, everyone. Hopefully, when you're listening to this, we have good news about season 2.
Yes, so we'll see how that goes today. I'm sure we'll be posting stuff on our Twitter account about the panel that's going on today. So thank you to the Cloak and Dagger writers for giving us a reality check gut punch on this week's episode. I do think we needed that. But yes, looking forward to next week's episode, and we can't wait to see you guys again. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Make sure you check out the show's description down below so you can follow us on social media. Talk to you next time.